What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today's a super exciting day. I've been waiting for this for a month and a half, and it even came in about a month early from when I placed the order, when they said it was gonna be here. Today, we are gonna be working on the Lamborghini and testing out whether it is worth it or not to buy any sort of carbon fiber stuff off of AliExpress. I know, why would you buy a couple $100,000 car and then cheap out on the carbon? Well, that's because I believe that even some of the name brand carbon parts are still manufactured overseas in China, and picking up something for $1,000 versus many thousands might just be worth it. So let's get this off of here and I'll get to showing you what showed up in the mail today. Look at all these stamps, this is crazy. It came all the way from China, as to be expected off of AliExpress. Now the big question is, what is it gonna look like, and is it worth it, and should you buy your carbon from AliExpress or pay thousands of dollars more? That's ultimately up to you, but I'm gonna give you my 2 cents. Let's get into it. I may have already had a peek in there. I'm just so excited I had to have a quick look before I showed you guys, but I packed it back up just so we can do an unboxing, so let's look at it. So it did come double boxed, pretty well packaged, honestly, and came with, everything was wrapped in bubble wrap and foam wrap and all that. So let's pull it out of here. This is going to replace the entire back end of the deck lid. There's our very first piece, forged carbon fiber, new deck lid to replace that right there. So the real question is how is it gonna fit? By first looking at this thing, it looks quite nice. No major flaws or imperfections. Not super rough underneath. It is very light, very light. So in comparison to some other carbon that I've had from reputable sites, honestly, this might even be better. Now, on to the main attraction here. Comes with all the hardware to mount the deck lid and mount the wing to the deck lid. The unfortunate thing is there are no holes drilled in the top of this to actually be able to screw it to, so we're gonna have to drill some holes in that. But it's par for the course. Now, let's look at the wing. And there it is. So it does have the holes drilled in the legs, and there is, if you can see, some metal threads in there. So once we have the holes drilled and we have the hardware, just straight up mount it. I'm probably gonna put a gasket in here just to take up any of the slack, and that way we don't crack anything when mounting it. But at first glance, honestly, it is a very nice piece. It's definitely super light, so it's not just a fiberglass that's been covered in carbon fiber. This is a true forged carbon fiber wing in the performonte style for probably 1/10 of the price of actually getting a performonte wing, especially straight from Lamborghini or any aftermarket source. I think I paid 900 and change for this Canadian dollars plus shipping, so it was, I think, 1,200 bucks all said and done Canadian dollars. So for you Americans, that's like 50 bucks. No, it's not that bad, but pretty close. Our exchange rate right now is brutal. But yeah, this is, honestly, for the money, I can't really complain. I don't have a professional performonte, factory one to compare it to, but by first glance, I'm not unhappy with this at all. You can see a couple of seams on the inside. So right there, you can see a seam kind of runs across the front there, and looks like they added some reinforcement to these legs of the wing. But that's good, you want that extra strength. You can see it on the other side as well. But all in all, not too bad. And there is a slight defect in it right there. It almost looks like a scratch or a crack, but it's not on the surface. It's deeper inside, but honestly, very minor. I can't complain about that at all. not wavy. It's fairly flat. It's very glossy. It's kind of nice. But again, yeah, you can just kind of see a seam in certain areas. And then on the underside as well, you can see a seam right here where they must have overlapped it. And you can actually kind of feel it a little bit of an overlap here and on the other side. But that's going to be buried, so does it really matter? The true test really is going to be if it fits and how well it fits, if there's any cutting required or any sanding or anything like that. But I think, honestly, by looking at this, it's going to work pretty well. Let's put it on the back of the car and see how it looks from there. So setting the wing up on the car, just as a test fit with the stock deck lid like this. I'm excited. This is dope. It's gonna look so good. There is a little bit of wobble to it, so it might just be twisted ever so slightly. But I think once you suck that down with the hardware, it'll pull it in straight, and who knows what it's gonna be like once we actually have the forged carbon fiber deck lid put on here as well. It could fit completely differently, and that's really gonna be the true testament of the fit, because that's where most of the hardware is gonna have to bolt everything up, and where it's gotta line up with the body lines, and the taillight's gotta get installed, plus there is some antennas and wiring and things that we're gonna have to mount on the inside, as well as the mounting bracket. So there's definitely some work there. There is kind of some dimples in the carbon deck lid to where the holes are gonna need to be drilled, I believe. Let's have a look here. So yeah, along this front edge here, there is some dimples to where it has to get drilled out. You can feel them with your fingers in along here. So that's cool that at least we kind of have a rough idea of where that's supposed to be drilled out, but just the actual wing attachment on top is where we're gonna have to drill some holes. So we're gonna be super careful, measure 75 times, cut once, drill once, you know what I'm saying? But yeah, so first things first, we gotta get this old one off. So that entails quite a bit of work. Got to basically take the whole trunk cover, engine cover up, remove all the interior plastics and the forged carbon fiber that's already in there, get all that off, get the back grille off, pull it all out, take the deck lid off, swap all the electronics over, mount this one up, make sure everything's gonna fit, and then we will get our measurements, put some tape down on the deck lid, take some measurements, mount this one, drill some holes, mount it all together, and then probably mount it onto the car as one and reassemble everything back together. So let's get into it. First things first, you gotta take this engine cover off, which is just a bunch of little quarter turn screws in here to get this off. And this is forged carbon fiber as well. It is matte finish, so that's the only unfortunate side of things, but I do prefer the gloss. So we got gloss forged carbon to go with the forged carbon that's in here, and eventually we'll get some forged carbon side skirts and a front lip splitter and everything like that. But let's go ahead and get this off of here. Then we gotta pop these off here and remove these plastics along the sides so that we can get to the bolts to get this deck cover off as well. All right, so we got all those panels out of the way, got them setting up over there. Pop these hydraulics off for the engine cover, and now we just got them resting back on so that this doesn't come crashing down on my head. Definitely a little dusty and dirty in here. Now would be a good time to clean your engine bay. There's a lot more space in here, definitely a lot more open, especially in these back corners. Sounds like my buddy Jesse's here to help out, so we'll introduce him in a minute here. But yeah, next thing we gotta do is get all these little Torx bits off of the back here to get this deck lid off, as well as some in the back bumper. All right, so now we got the back grill part off with the T20 Torx bolts that were there, and we got the factory deck lid off, which were T27s. All the plastics are out. Now it's time to swap everything over from the factory deck lid to the carbon one. So that includes the mounting bracket here that goes behind the grill, plus all these clips for the forged carbon engine bay covers. And we gotta drill these holes for the actual mounts themselves. Looks like we're gonna be short a couple of mounting places. We have this one here and this one here, but we do not have the two inside ones that are shown here. Before you go and yank the deck lid off, there are 3 wires you have to unplug. 1 for the satellite radio antenna and 2 for the tail lights. And that's the other thing we have to swap over. pull those 2 screws. These Torx again looks about a T20 from the inside there and to the inside there. Remove those screws. So we got everything stripped off of the old deck lid other than the antenna. We mocked up the mounting bracket back onto the car and then rested the new deck lid on there, marked some holes, drilled them in, test fitted again. It was good. Then we just swapped over the tail light assembly and had to drill some holes into the back there once we had it sitting in there right. One side was a little out right there, and I had to file it just a bit. Maybe it was this side actually. Yeah, had to file it just a little bit, but all in all, everything's been fitting pretty good. Everything looks good, nothing's cracked yet. Cross your fingers. But now we just gotta put that mounting bracket back on and then work on drilling out all these holes on top like these, and then put our clips on and then mount her in. Should be good. All right, so we got the deck lid on, taillight install. We just have it mocked up, 2 holes, 2 bolts put in, and now we are setting the adjustments on the inside and finding our holes to mount in here, lining them up, kind of eyeballing them, and these bolts underneath here, the nuts can actually be adjusted up and down so that we can get these corner body lines lined up and these edges and the trunk and everything. So it's a bit of a process. I don't think it would be any better necessarily with say a Vorsteiner kit or anything, name brand, apart from this Alibaba special or AliExpress special. So I mean, there's been a little bit of finagling going on, but what do you expect when you're changing body parts? You're always gonna have to line up, the body lines and everything like that, and drill a few holes here and there. But so far, so good. It's looking good. Everything's going fairly smooth. Just slow and steady wins the race. And yeah, we'll get all these holes drilled out, reamed out, and everything adjusted, get our body lines adjusted, and then we'll final mount everything and relocate the antenna and all the wiring and stuff that was underneath. And we should be good to go to start mounting and marking for the actual wing itself. All right, so we got everything transferred over now. Just transferred the antenna wire, just stuck it under some tape. It was held on with this Velcro before. You can see here. And there's only 2 mounting points instead of 4 now for the bracket that holds it behind the grill. So there's only 1 in each corner, but the material is really thick on this one side, so we had to use a lot longer of a screw and nut and some Loctite on that one, just make sure that that doesn't go anywhere. And then on this side, it's a little bit shorter of a bolt, so it's a little bit janky, but whatever. We got all the screws, holes drilled out for the mounting points for up front, as well as these clips transferred over for the 1/4 turn screws, so everything should be good to go. There's a serious concern that there's not enough rigidity through those 2 little bolts and washers on each stanchion into this piece that's gonna actually be able to hold it, especially at high speeds that I might like to do. So might have to get some fender washers, just thicken that bottom end up a bit, give it some more support when it starts getting some wind on it and stuff like that. Also, we kind of self-tapped in this module that was underneath here before on the stock one. There's nowhere to mount it now, so I just mounted it down. That way that wire is still ran basically how it was before, but rather than being upside down, it's just right here. And now we're ready to plug everything in, mount it up, put the 4 bolts in along the back, 4 bolts in along the top. These need to be adjusted. These pieces here can adjust it so that the front of the deck lid can come up to match these body lines here. So those are screwed out as much as we dared screw them out to make everything line up. The fitment is fairly good, but definitely some big gaps back here. But yeah, it's definitely not ideal. That side looks huge. Like, you can see right through it. We could try to sand these edges down. And this sticks out a little ways. It's not too bad. But that, not good. Alright, so I got the deck lid drilled out and the wing mounted now, and everything's squared up and bolted on, but it's still, for my liking, a little wobbly, especially at speed. And I think there's just a lot of flex on this deck lid here underneath, and lacking the two center mounting points for the bracket that holds it to the bumper just causes a lot of movement. I went and picked up some aluminum so it's nice and light, so we're not going to completely ruin the carbon fiber aspect of this. So the plan is I'll take this wing back apart and I will use that aluminum as a spacer on the back side of the trunk lid to sandwich between everything, and then it'll still be light. And if that doesn't work, worst comes to worst, we're just gonna have to mount the factory deck lid back on and drill the holes in that and mount the wing to it. Because the wing itself, the quality, I like it. It looks fantastic. Like, I'm really loving this right now. However, just the rigidity aspect of the carbon fiber deck lid is what has me concerned. So I'm gonna try and stiffen that up, and I might try and shorten the bracket on the back a little bit too, shave that down a notch to get the corner sucked in a bit more, because the gap here is not great, but I can only bolt in here so hard and pull this in. But if I shorten this metal bracket so that it tucks further in to the deck lid itself, if I shorten that up, then it'll pull this forward a bit, which will then bring this forward on the inside here, which needs to do that as well. So I just gotta do a couple of fine tuning and adjustments, nothing crazy. I mean, I'm sure anything would have to have a little bit of adjustment. I did sand these legs down real quick with a palm sander, just kind of knock the excess resin off of the bottom and try to flatten them out, because there was that big gap underneath here before, and just a little bit of sanding really made that a heck of a lot better. There's still a bit of a gap on the back here, right there, and same on this side, which isn't helping the situation either. So I think adding that stiffener is going to be able to suck that down a lot tighter and kind of flex it into place where it needs to be. All right, so got this plate underneath here, and then basically took the wing off and put a paint pen through, drilled some holes in the aluminum. Now I have this giant aluminum washer, basically stiffener plate on the bottom side of the wing. That should make that more rigid. And then I was able to get the hardware snugged up a lot more. Plus now we're going through these plates that drop down that weren't necessarily meant to, suck that down, but it just so happened that it lined up like that. So we have now pinched it all together. Plus I took the mounting bracket off of here, slid this down, sanded the inside so we could slide it in a bit further so we could fix that one gap. And I put some double-sided sticky tape underneath this lip where there's no longer these mounts, just to try to hold this mounting bracket to the trunk lid here a little better. So now this is a lot more rigid. This isn't bouncing around, so that should take out a lot of that slop. Plus the aluminum that's in there, that should really help take out a lot of the slop, and everything's snugged down a lot more. I still got the masking tape on it. Still gonna have to pull this out one more time to take the tape off and put a gasket on the other side, but I didn't want to do that and stick it all together with the wing to the deck lid until I knew for sure that it was going to be stiff enough to actually be able to use this. And I think this has really helped now that everything's snug and just stiffened a little bit and readjusted some things and changed out the hardware as well on this mounting bracket. Before I had to use longer hardware, but I was able to actually get the shorter hardware that came with the kit to work. So it's almost like they meant it to be this way. I just didn't do it that way, so maybe it's my fault, maybe it's the quality of the wing. But once you actually use the right hardware and it all fits up into the backside of these stiffeners here, it's quite rounded, so the nuts don't fit overly well, and the ones I had on there definitely weren't overly tight, so I think that was part of the problem. I did put some Loctite on them, but it didn't seem to help a whole lot, and I just couldn't get it tightened up enough because of the way it's rounded up in there, that the nut was kind of sitting sideways and it wasn't overly great. But now with these smaller nuts, the hardware that came with it, I was able to use that. And then the double-sided sticky tape, the aluminum plate, everything snugged down. Let's give it a test fit and see if it's a lot stiffer on the car now once it's bolted up. Well, got her all back bolted on, everything tight. All the stiffeners that I could put on it are on it, and it's still a little bit wobbly for my liking. Especially put any serious force on this thing. Going real fast, I don't think she's gonna hold up. I'm gonna pull it off one more time, see if I can figure out why it's wobbly or where it's coming from. And if I can't figure it out, I'm just gonna have to go with the factory deck lid. The wing itself is nice. The deck lid obviously is too thin or something, just wasn't manufactured thick enough or strong enough to support the size of this wing, and especially any downforce is going to occur. I mean, I could get away with it the way it is now, but there's a little bit of thumping and I don't like that. The fitment is way better now that I've adjusted things. Like its fitment is good now. Everywhere, all the lines, everything's lining up really, really well now that I've made the few adjustments and tweaks, and I could probably get it even slightly better just by backing things off, sliding them left and right, the way I've notched the holes open a bit. But honestly, that's not the issue. The issue is that add 200 pounds of downforce or whatever this wing may provide, I don't think she's gonna cut it. So long story short, really, if you're looking to buy inexpensive carbon off of AliExpress, it's hit or miss. I mean, the wing itself is pretty nice. And for the thousands of dollars I'm saving, I like it. I'm probably gonna keep it. I'm not gonna go a different route, but I think I might go back to the factory trunk lid just for that support that it needs, being metal and a little stiffer. I don't want this thing flying off. So I'm gonna give this one more attempt to try and stiffen it, and if not, I'll swap everything back to the factory one. So looking at this here, I think it's this front lip and inside piece that's just too thin, and that's where that movement's coming from. No matter how hard you bolt this down, this is still gonna flex in and out. So unless we put another stiffener in here or lay some fiberglass or some carbon in here to thicken this up, and potentially this top lip as well, I just don't see this ever being thick enough or strong enough to withstand the forces that it's gonna see. So at this point, we might just have to start drilling holes in the factory one. I was just worried about putting holes in the factory lid, but honestly, I'm probably never gonna sell this car, but you never know. And if we do a good job, then what does it really matter? So I'm gonna take the wing off of there, rest it on here, and see how it looks. See if the sanding that I did to fit that trunk lid will allow the legs to stand on here fairly decently. So I got this wing, or this trunk lid, just resting on here for now, but we can find center of it. So we've done that. I've marked some masking tape on the center line, and then 2 more masking tapes on either side. And then I've taken the overall width of the wing, and that's how I found out where to put that tape. Found center, measured, split that width from center to center of those holes in the bottom of the wing. Cut that in half, did that to each side, found center of each leg, and then from there I figured out the length from the back of the wing leg, which is gonna sit flush with the back of the trunk lid here. Forward, measured that with the caliper, and then measured with the caliper on the trunk lid from that back edge to the first bolt hole along that line, and then same thing with the front holes, both sides. And then I just double checked all my measurements from corner to corner, each side, and then from inside lip here to this dot on both sides. Just double check, triple check everything, because I don't want to put holes in this lid, but I'm gonna have to, just because that one, the carbon fiber one that it came with, is just not strong enough. I might in the future put some more fiberglass or carbon on the backside and stiffen it up, but for now I want to get this thing finished up. So we're going to use the factory trunk lid, and I'm going to have to put some holes in it, mount the wing to this, transfer over the antennas and all the wiring and everything again, and the brackets and mounts and all that sort of stuff, and we should be good to go. Measure 75 times. Oh boy. And drill once. Well, that was easy. All right, now we'll step the bit up. Those are just pilot holes. We'll step up the bit and mount this wing. Well, got her all back together. Even the factory trunk lid is still a little wobbly, but a hell of a lot better. Put in a couple extra screws on the rear mounting bracket to stiffen it up a bunch. So So this is all back together in here. Wing is on. Body lines are squared up the best I could. Got the rear grille back on. Squared that up the best I could. And the tape off of here. Everything's back together. See how she looks? Bam. All said and done. Can't really complain. That looks pretty damn good. Chinese carbon fiber. Carbon fiber. Carbon fiber. I'm pretty happy with that, to be honest. Hell yeah. But like I said, there's still a little bit of movement to it when you're pulling down on it. But I think she'll be good. It's pretty solid though. It's putting a good amount of pressure on it, and it's a hell of a lot better than it was. It looks quite square too. So thanks for watching. Hopefully this helps you make a decision whether you want to go with a name brand reputable carbon fiber place like Vorsteiner and spend all of your money on a wing, or if you're like me, even though you have a few $100,000 car, you want to cheap out and buy something inexpensive, because it just doesn't make sense to spend a whole lot of money on name brand carbon fiber when I think it's roughly all the same. Yes, I had some issues. Yes, the trunk lid doesn't fit, but you can take what you get. I could keep modding that, add a little bit more fiberglass or carbon on the inside, but ultimately I am super pumped on what I have for the $980 plus shipping I think that it was. I'm saving thousands of dollars. Yes, it may look like I have a bunch of money, but I really don't. I'm super cheap, and the only reason I got this because it was the cheapest Huracan in all of Canada, and I traded 2 cars in for it. And yeah, if you haven't watched the other videos, go back and watch that on how I achieved getting this car. But thanks for watching. Hopefully this helps you make your decision on whether or not to buy anything off of AliExpress.